Hello, and welcome to another video. In this video, I want to cover a couple of things because I find it relatively important. This match is a great showcase as to why combat is important and sometimes dying is necessary. Basically, to just get into it, in this situation, our team evenly splits 4 on one side and 4 on the other side. The enemy team does not do this as well, so this means that they will need to rotate. They end up not rotating and ended up just basically steamrolling through the match. Basically, what needs to happen here, somebody rotates and or they split up accordingly and actually incentivize on actually fighting, because in the beginning of the match it is most important everybody has all their offensive cooldowns and defensive cooldowns to basically make use of everything you have. Whether it's your defensives, whether it's your med pack, your general, your group utility, anything that you have, it's really important. So for example, some players aren't going to be great at PvP, and that's completely okay. But at the very least, you should at least attempt to try to figure out what your defensives are and use them accordingly, especially at the beginning of the game, because it's very important to basically not get completely cleared at the beginning of the game. Because if you let that happen, there's a lot of potential for steamrolling to happen. So for example, they bring a lot of players to overcompensate after we've already capped. And they should be running down to protect their next objective, but unfortunately they are not. They're fighting here because they see that they have a numbers advantage. They should not be doing this, and instead, again, they should be defending. But because they don't, we get the second objective because we have stealthers. And getting that bridge and a SWTOR is really important, because then after that you can spiral even further. So when we kill these players, they're going to respawn in a place further and further and further. As farther we get, they're going to be further away when they respawn. Meaning they have less chances of basically actually defending any of these doors or any of these objectives. As you can see, this leads us to getting to the end room pretty much right away after the first fight in the first room. Had they just committed to the fight in the beginning, we would not be in this situation. If anybody tells you that, oh, you shouldn't be dying in this class, or you shouldn't die in PvP, stuff like this, if at any time somebody says that to you, they just, I don't want to be rude, but they just straight up don't know what they're talking about. When it comes to solo ranked, yes, survival is key. That's the number one thing that you want to focus on. When it comes to group ranked, obviously survival is also key, but you also still need to apply pressure. That's a completely different story. But when it comes to regular war zones, you're not going to be able to survive anywhere near as long as you can in those two modes, because it's 8 versus 8. And if you don't play accordingly, you're basically just going to get steamrolled. Some situations, you're just not going to have a healer, and you're gonna die. Like, let's say there's 4 players, they all target you all of a sudden, and you're not fast enough to pop defensives. You're just gonna get popped. Like, it's just going to happen. It's just something that needs to be, for lack of a better word, normalized. Even though that's not necessarily what should happen. You should just try to remember that dying is sometimes necessary. So for example, if you're the last person defending a door and you called it out, you need to stay there until you die, unless somebody else relieves you and you can go heal. Like if you have a reset. If you don't have a reset, sometimes it's just better for you to die there protecting it. Some classes are just really good at that. For example, Juggernaut. You don't really have an escape. You're not really going to get out of combat. You need to stay there and you need to fight. Some classes are better and some classes are worse at this. For example, Juggernaut is really nice because in the beginning they have quite a bit of survivability and offensive power available to them, mostly rage for offensive power, but if you stack up for vengeance, you're going to get cleaved down really fast. It also ups their survivability on vengeance if you stack up. So basically what you really want to think about is, if there are a lot of classes that have a lot of front-loaded, like defensive, I guess you could say, enriched defense, saber ward, stuff like that. Like, I can survive quite a bit of time just because of those defenses. But once those are actually on cooldown and they have a decently long-ish kind of cooldown, because I'm not taking the cooldown reduction on enraged defense, I could make it 130. But basically those cooldowns are relatively longer than most defensive cooldowns. Meaning just avoiding it or kiting it or just trying to get away from it is the optimal solution, or just fighting it and dealing with it. And then after those defenses are gone, it makes it a lot easier to take out those players. And for example, in the second round, I go and basically dive into them because I know that our team's going to defend our doors. And if I can stop as many players as I can from attacking one of our doors, the better. Because that means I can then keep those guys from having any potential of capping. While it does mean that I might sacrifice myself, that's completely fine with me. At this point, the game is mostly secured, and if I can prevent them from continuing on, that means my chances of winning go up tremendously. Obviously, this is a Void Star, so the idea of stalling a team doesn't necessarily always work in every single mode. Stalling is very effective in Civil War. It's probably the most effective in that mode than any other mode possible, because it's not as easy to basically cap that node, because if you're stalling, you have a lot of options around the node to usually stall. In Void Star, it's a little bit more open. The battleground's not going to be favorable for people that would want to like stall for a really long time. You can still stall pretty well, especially if you're a class that can, do that a lot better than other classes. However, it's just not going to be as effective as you were like on a Civil War, for example. And in this mode, you don't have to worry about kills or deaths unless they match the same amount of doors that you also got. So if you have the same amount of doors, it goes off of who's the fastest, or if it's relatively the same, it goes off who gets the most kills. So in this situation, I have no worries about dying. If I can throw away basically my body to prevent them from doing anything, it's 100% worth it. And what they should be doing is trying to rotate until they have more players on one side and hopefully secure the door, or distract us enough to have everybody on one side and somebody stinks the other door. And then it basically all comes down to fighting. If you don't know how to fight, again, that's completely fine. You can still have a lot of fun in PvP without actually really knowing what you're doing. I think that's the best part of it. You can definitely start at lobbies. Lobbies is a lot of fun. Maybe it's going to be a lot of fun too. It helps you basically understand the maps and understand basically the basics of PvP as a whole, which is great. I think it's a wonderful option. Unfortunately, there's not really any tutorials unless you want to read the codex. By all means, you can definitely read that. But basically, the strategies for playing PvP is always going to be different from person to person. For example, I would consider node defending solved, but a lot of people don't have any idea how to properly node defend at all. So maybe I'll make a video on that. I would love to see matches like go up in quality, but I would also just like to see people enjoying themselves and actually, fighting rather than just running away and basically not contributing like at all. Like for example, this felt like a match against 4 to 5 players throughout the entire game, occasionally 6. I never really saw all 8, which is super unfortunate.